All right, everybody, and welcome to the HBYOB Brewcast. I'm now, I guess I would say, my normal joke is I like to say that I'm somebody's twin brother, but I'm not going to say that for Mark because that doesn't really work for me. I know I've said that I'm Joey's twin brother, but Mark's like slightly older than I am, so I'm not gonna play that. I'm Chris Allen. I'll be your host tonight as Mark's off on assignment. And it's just me and Joey tonight. So you get to kick it with us. And we're going to talk a little bit about just brewing. I mean, we're going to shoot from the hip and really kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of, kind of why we got into brewing, what kind of keeps us going, why we still brew to this day. I think for Joey, I think that, that answer is fairly simple. But we'll get into that. So we'll talk about all that tonight while we review a couple of good brews that we have on tap here at our respective houses. So, Joey, man, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well. How about you, Chris?
I can't complain. Been looking forward to doing this tonight with you. And, I think it'll be kind of fun to kind of get into our respective backstories and find out a little bit more so the folks can, really get a feel for, why we do what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what
are you drinking, Chris?
So let's see. So I've got, and again, I mean, you guys know me at this point. I mean, if it doesn't have good can art, I mean, just put it back on the shelf. Don't even bring it in. Don't even bring it in my house. But again, I'm sticking with Against the Grain. I'm really digging their brews as of late. And so this is Show Enough, and you can see here. So I'll show it to you guys. I mean, look at that. I mean, how can you pass up something like that? So this is what is this? This is a golden ale. I think it's like 4.7, 4.8%. Some of there. Oh, there it is on the can. 4.9%. So I mean, a good session ale. And I haven't actually tasted it yet. So Mark would be kind of proud of me that before the show started, I haven't had anything to drink yet. So I can't really rate or review the brew itself, but I am looking forward to it because it's an awesome can. And you guys have seen me over the past couple of weeks try some of their other brews, so I think it'll be pretty good. I mean, just off the top. So what do you got?
So I'm drinking the New England IPA that I brought to your house. What was it, Saturday? And so if you want, I'm not going to review my beer that I brewed, but since you love can art, I brought another.
Yes.
So it's actually a cider I made over a year ago, so it's had plenty of time to age. And if I get into it, then great. So we'll see how it goes. But so I guess to get things started, Chris, you had my NEIPA. What did you think,
dude? I mean, to be quite honest with you, and we've talked about how the style in and of itself is kind of. I mean, look at that. I mean, I love the color. I love the color. I love the haziness. But for us, I mean, and we've talked about it before. I mean, it wouldn't be I would say it's not a typical style that you would go out and let's say like purchase a 6-pack of it, or if there was one, on tap at a bar or something like that. That wouldn't be the first thing that I would reach for. At least that not me. I mean, I would go for something that has some of the similar characteristics of a NEIPA, with it being having the citrus aroma, the citrus flavor and whatnot. I like that in a brew, but just for some reason, that particular style, it's just, I don't know, not always for me, but I do like it in some cases. But for yours in particular, I mean, I thought right off the bat, I mean, the aroma hits you. I mean, it's got that fruity, citrusy aroma to it. The hops, I mean, the way that the hops and then also the malt, I thought it was very well balanced. And just looking at the color with the cloudiness and all that, I thought it was. I mean, I thought let's say if we went to, that homebrew competition from last year, I think as they graded on style, I think you would have hit that.
Yeah.
That would have been like a 37, 38 points somewhere in there. You would have got. That's what you would have scored.
Well, I've not had a whole lot of examples of this beer, but I would say mine. I've had some examples of the NEIPA, and they've been just malt bomb, almost absolutely, zero IBUs, no bitterness. I've also had some that have been somewhat bitter, which for this style I think is a little bit. I like mine. It's not bitter, but yet it's not zero IBUs. You do know in every way. There's a lot of presence of hops. I think on a 5-gallon batch I had like close to a pound in there. So. And I think my first hop edition was at 10 minutes. So, I mean, there's just a ridiculous amount of hops in here, and it's not bitter, it's not sweet. It's just, I don't even want to use the word well balanced because it's a hop bomb. So
exactly.
you know, but it's not bitter. You know, when I say well balanced, it's something my wife actually drank it and she finished a 5-ounce sample, which says a lot for this beer. And I can't stop drinking it. It's not going to last on my cake long at all. It took the place of the stout, and, and the stout was there for close to a year, and this one's going to be there maybe 3 weeks max.
I would say, yeah, give it a month, and that you'll probably have that completely cleared out. So for the folks at home, I mean, just to give them a better idea of, I mean, of what you did put together with that. So since you own HBYOB, I would assume that you have all the ingredients. So can you walk the folks through like what you used in order to brew that?
So I actually took a recipe. I tell all the customers that come in the store, I give myself a little credit for being fairly knowledgeable of homebrewing. However, when it comes to recipe construction, I'm not your guy. Every time I brew my own recipe, it turns out shitty. And I just, you got to know your lane. You got to know what lane to stay in. So I got on the internet, looked up a bunch of recipes, and actually stumbled across this recipe. And so I took a recipe as someone who had 10 different hops in it, and I just really condensed it. So basically the grain bill was some two-row, some flaked wheat, some not white wheat, but just regular wheat malt. And then I just used 2 hops, Mosaic and Citra. I used a whole lot of them. And then I used a London Ale 3. I believe that's 1318 by Y Yeast. So I think a lot of the haze is coming from the 1318 along with the wheat malt, the flaked wheat. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm not a haze guy, but it does have quite a bit of haze. That
looks like you added some flour to it.
It does. Sure. I promise you I didn't. And I actually was contemplating on adding fruit to it. I was thinking pineapple or orange juice. But honestly, the thing turned out, in my opinion, so juicy. I'm really meant to put air quotes there that I ended up omitting the fruit because in my opinion, I didn't want it to taste like Brass Monkey. So I just went with it the way it was.
What's the ABV on that?
I believe it's like 7.2. I think is what it came out to be.
Okay,
it might be either somewhere between 6.8 and 7.2.
And now with the hop schedule, you said most of the stuff that you added was around the 10-minute mark, and I would assume there was some dry hopping involved in there as well, right?
It actually, if my memory serves me correctly, I put 10 minutes. I put like a half an ounce of either Citra or Mosaic. Like I said, I only used 2, which is where I simplified the recipe. And then there was a shit ton that went in at 5 minutes, a lot that went in at 0 minutes, and then I actually did like a 7-ounce Whirlpool edition.
Okay.
And for those that don't know what that means, it basically means I killed the boil. I brought it down below 170 degrees. I threw like 7 ounces of hops in there, and then I just let it sit for 20 minutes. Did a hop stand Whirlpool. There's people hop bursting. People call it a lot of different things. So, and then I let it sit for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I kicked my chiller back on, took it to pitching temperature, and then transferred it to the fermenter. Then I dry hopped it with, I think, 6 ounces. So just in the Whirlpool edition and the dry hopping, there was close to 12 ounces just right there. And then, yeah, so when it came to actual boil time, I think no more than like maybe an ounce or 2 actually went in the actual boil.
Gotcha. Okay. So, so overall, that does sound like something that, at least from the way that you described it, it seems like it's a recipe that's, fairly simplistic in terms of the grain bill. Doesn't seem like, it doesn't seem too complicated. It just, once you get into the process, it seems like a lot of stuff happens like all at the end.
I'm actually gonna bring it up right now. If anyone wants to know, I used 11 pounds of 2-row, 1.5 pounds of wheat, a half a pound of honey malt, and 1.5 pounds of flaked oats. Then 10 minutes, I put 2 ounces of Citra. That's where I was incorrect, and that was it. So I was right and I was wrong. So 2 ounces of Citra went in at 10 minutes. That's all it went into the boil. Then I put 3 ounces of Citra and 1.5 ounces of Mosaic for the hop stand or hop bursting or Whirlpool, whatever you want to call it,
right?
For 15 minutes. And then I used 2 ounces of Mosaic and 5 ounces of Citra as dry hop. That's what the beer. So if the based on the recipe I have, the IBUs are 57, which I used. I used Grainfather's calculator. I don't think that's going to be accurate. I think some of those are pretty way off. And it says the ABV is a 6.5.
Okay.
So we're looking at 6.5.
All right, that's not too hateful at all. I mean, and for what you described, it doesn't seem like it'd be, well, I mean, the hops. So what are we talking about in terms of total grain bill? If I had to just do this, like just quick math in my head with what do you say, like 12 to 14 ounces of hops?
3, 4, 4.5. It looks like 4.5 pounds of total grains. Or 4.5. No, I'm sorry. 14.5.
14.5 pounds of grain. And then how many ounces of hops? Was that like 14 ounces of hops?
So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 13.5.
Okay. So then ballpark estimate for somebody that wanted to come in the store to brew that, I put that in the $45 to $50 range. Does that seem fair?
I honestly feel that's probably a fair assessment, especially because I used liquid yeast, 13, 18. And that's the thing, you brew a beer like this, you're not brewing a beer like this to save money.
Right.
You're brewing a beer like this because I've heard people saying they're paying $6, $7, $8 just at the store dollars a beer for this. So to be able to brew it for, under a buck a beer, how do you beat that?
You can. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think I know that, and we'll probably get into this here in a little bit, but that's one of the, the sales pitches that I gave to my wife in terms of, what got me brewing was that, I can save money because you're brewing 5 gallons at a time. So, I mean, really, the value added, by doing something like that. But I think in this case, that is one of those times where, for how much you're brewing at any particular time, your batch size versus how much it costs for you to get it, to get at the bar or whatever. Yeah, I do think there is some value to, to be added there for sure.
I guess that would be a perfect segue of just kind of what today's show was about. Chris, why I've always wanted to know, we've been friends for years now, and I think we got brewing about the same point in time. What got you started in brewing?
For me, at least, I was always, I guess, intrigued when it came to making beer. I'd known a couple of buddies that were into making wine. I hadn't really known anybody else that got into that was really into making beer. So when you and I started hanging out and playing cards together, and you had mentioned that you were doing it, it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, that does sound like something I wanted to get into. And then, the more we started hanging out, it was like, you were brewing this or doing that, and then, sampled a couple of your home brews. And it was like, okay, well, I think I can do this. And I got one of those Mr. Beer kits, I think off of Amazon for, what is like $40, $50.
Yeah.
Plastic bottles everywhere. And, eventually, and I've told you this story. I don't know how many times of, the first kettle that I had, I wound up scorching the bottom of that because I didn't properly heat up the malt beforehand, and that happens.
Yeah.
But it was just an interest in doing something different, right? Out of the many hobbies that I had, or and still have, that was one of the ones where it's like I could see myself doing this, not necessarily every month or every week or whatever, but it's something that, as the more you do it, I do think it is something that you tend to get better at, and not necessarily because of the things that you learn. I've made some mistakes and screwed up, and I've had a sour batch of beer here, or I haven't hit my gravity targets there. But I think it's more of your mistakes make you want to do it more. If I'm describing it correctly, it's just kind of one of those, and it's not really a frustrating thing in some cases. Unless you completely screw up a batch, but when it comes to brewing beer, I was aiming for something that was going to be 7.5%, and it's 6.8%. It's still beer. It's still alcohol. I'm still going to drink it. So I like it, and then you can, you find out why, and you start talking with folks, you start interacting with people. And then, you're at a bar and you're like, hey, I've got this homebrew. And, so folks start to ask you about it. Yeah. It's one of those things where I would say it's fairly akin to fantasy football nowadays, like where it is one of those, as you start, it's kind of one of those conversations where you can just have in passing with somebody, and it's just, oh yeah, I like to do this too, or I've sampled this beer or whatever. And even for folks that that just like the big three, Miller, Bud, whatever, you can still have a conversation about brewing beer, because a lot of those guys grew up probably making making whiskey with with their parents or with their buddies or whatever out in the country somewhere. So I think making alcohol is something that almost anybody can be interested in. So I think that's why I started doing it. I mean, what about you though?
It's funny because I've been brewing for a long time, and I don't use that as a excuse to think that I know it all, but I started homebrewing simply because my wife was working at the hospital. I had little kids, and I was into beer. I like drinking beer a whole lot, but I had little kids at the house, and so I wanted to be involved in beer, but I didn't want to drink beer because I had little kids to watch. And so I started watching some videos, and somehow I stumbled across a video that was just about how to brew beer. And so I was talking to Mark, who's not with us today, and he said, "Oh yeah, I used to brew beer. I've got this Mr. Beer kit, and I'll give it to you. I haven't used it in years." And he basically gave me the same story. When my kids were little, I used to brew beer all the time. It gave me something to do, kept me in beer. And, now my kids are older and I can just go buy a beer at the store. I decided to, not use it anymore. Here, you can have it. And so, circa made my first batch and turned out terrible. It was train wreck. But at the end of the day, I made something that I was just like, wow, I made this. And so for me, I got started basically just that whole, I can do this. I have a garden, and it's just one of those, I grow jalapenos, and it's cool to say I grew these. When you put it into food, you're like, I grew this, and that's, I think for me, I immediately got into brewing of I can make beer. I can do it myself, and learning the fact that, you don't have to go to the brewers to do it. You can actually make this at home. Just sparked a fire. And what's weird is I have a lot of customers come in, and they very much aren't, for the most part, like that now. A lot of people who come in, because craft beer is now so popular, they already kind of have a good idea because they've been to craft beer breweries of what it takes to make beer. They just know they're going to make it on a small scale. So they really kind of jump into it, all in right out of the gate, versus I kind of stepped my way into it. And it was me just always chasing that. How do I make really good tasting beer? I got to be honest. I was a Coors Light drinker when I started brewing. I thought anything craft beer related tasted horrible. I couldn't stand it. And it was the opposite nowadays. It seems like people are into craft beer, so they get into home brewing. When I got started, I was into home brewing, and then I got into craft beer because of home brewing, because realizing I can't make Coors Light as a home brewer, because there's really not a point in it. So I mean,
exactly.
So I mean, I guess that's kind of what got me started, and it's just been kind of rewarding as a home brew store owner to see how things do change. And so you have to adapt into it. Same thing like the New England IPA. People come in the store and say they start homebrewing just because I want to make this beer style. And we have a lot of people who start out because they say, I want to enter in competitions, or I already have aspirations of opening my own brewery. Show me how I get started, because I want to be a home brewer first so I can, get started being because I want to own my own brewery one day.
Right.
It's just amazing that people have different motives for getting started. And the reason why I got started close to 10 years ago now really isn't kind of the standard way it seems like anymore.
And I would agree with you there. And you bring up an excellent point, because I would say I was in the same boat as you, because we didn't have, how many breweries were in Dayton at the time? 7-8 years ago when we started doing this, there really weren't that many.
Maybe two. Two. We were lucky.
So our access to craft brew, was fairly limited. We would pass Sierra Nevada back and forth like it was, the best thing since sliced bread, and other than that, it was, we drank beer, but it wasn't anything that, hell, how many times did we bring, Colt 45 and the rest of the stuff that you can get is, you know, cheap at, you know, at a gas station. You
I
know,
still like it. I still do.
Yeah. I'll buy a can of that. Ain't nobody above a can of Colt 45. I mean, there's just, you can't tell me otherwise. But I mean, but our process for getting into home brewing was that we like beer. So, I mean, and just beer in general. It didn't have to be craft, you know, craft beer or anything like that. It was just we like beer, and you know, we also like the satisfaction of creating something. So why not marry those two things, and voila, I mean, you have home brewing. But now, I mean, it very much is that folks will go to King's Table, folks will go to, you know, Crooked Handle, folks will go to, you know, wherever and have this beer and say, you know, oh, I could make this.
Yeah.
Oh, I could actually have, you know, 5 gallons of, you know, of this, that, and the other, you know, and you know, somebody could teach me how to do that. Well, I'm going to do that. Show me how to do that. You know,
it's even like when, you know, like I said, when I got started brewing, I have to be honest, to me, it was just, how can I make beer cheaper than Bud Light? And that's kind of a weird thing, because nowadays it seems like people, you know, really don't care about that. I mean, cost is a factor, don't get me wrong, but you know, it's just one of those things where they want to make good quality beer. Like you had said, we now respect the beer that we drink. So it's crazy that people, they will go and they will purchase beer. Like, I paid, you know, $25 for 4 beers, and that whole farm to table, like it's just such a good movement. We had a couple breweries, we had a couple crappy, I don't know, crappy is a bad word, you know, a couple examples of what craft beer was. And at the time we weren't really prepared for it. And now everybody's opened up a brewery, and people learn that dream is alive. I can do this. It used to be before, you know, Anheuser-Busch and Coors and Miller, they had this magical system that turned, you know, water and barley and hops and yeast into alcohol, and you couldn't do it at home. And now people that dream of, no, I can do this. I can have a business. I can have this, or I can have that. It's alive. And that's what I love about craft beer.
Yeah. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you, is that now it's been, I definitely don't want to put us in the realm of like, we're the old dogs kind of watching, you know, this new generation of brewers coming in. But I would say that it has been, you know, really exciting to see the industry kind of build up around us as, you know, as we continue to do it, you know, over so many years, that it wasn't just something that, you know, when we first started doing it, you would mention it to somebody and they would say, oh, that's cool. And then, you know, we'll just keep the conversation rolling in another direction. Now it's like folks actually want to hear about it. Folks actually want to talk about it, and folks will mention, you know, this brew, that brew. I mean, you can get into a full-fledged conversation with folks about it, because, you know, not just the home brewing, you know, the beer in and of itself is interesting to other folks, but just the hobby, you know, and folks want to learn more about it and like what goes into it. And, you know, like you met my buddy Justin over the weekend. I mean, he was interested in craft brew, also interested in brewing, had never done it before until we did that Hefeweizen a couple months ago. And I mean, he's really stoked about understanding the process that goes into it. And I mean, I can't tell you how many folks that have at least, you know, intimated that there's, you know, they also have that same level of interest. So it has been really interesting. And I think moving on from that, you know, so we've talked about what got us started, but I mean, what keeps you, you know, what keeps you going? I mean, at this point.
So, not to cut you off, but we did just get a message here live. And it says, I can't pronounce this, I'm going to hack it to pieces, but it says, man, I'm from Australia. Shout out to Australia. I love Australia. Hey. Never been there, but I can't wait to go visit there one day. I'm 80% beer. So maybe you can keep chatting and let me know what that means, because I'm scratching my head on that one. So thank you for putting that in the chat. You know, I guess so. Chris, you had said how you got started and how I got started. What was, for you, what kept you brewing? You know, why you started brewing? Because, you know, it was interesting and you had some pitfalls because, you know, it didn't turn out very good, or you was dissatisfied what you're buying. A lot of people at the time we started homebrewing because we truly couldn't get our hands on certain beers around the world. So the closest thing we could come to it was brewing that similar style. Just like that's why, you know, Zombie Dust and Pliny recipes are very popular in the store, because we're in Ohio, we can get our hands on it.
Right.
So I get that. So, you know, what you started home brewing, what kept you brewing? You know, what were the essential tools to home brewing while you're still doing it?
I would say that the main thing that's kept me going, and I'll take it back to when I first started doing it. My old college roommate, Vic, his dad, Chuck Volley, I think he's now a retired professor from the University of Cincinnati, where I did my undergraduate studies. He has been a brewer. I'm assuming he's still doing it, but I know he was a brewer for decades. I think he's met Papazian a number of times, and he's actually a retired chemist. So the few times that I went over to his house, I remember he would literally have beakers and test tubes and lab equipment that he borrowed from the university, like in their basement, and he would just have stuff going everywhere. And I was like, "What is this?" And we talked about it a couple of times, but I remember the day Vic graduated from med school, I went over to his house and I told him that I'd gotten into brewing, and he said, I mean, the first thing out of his mouth was, "Just keep doing it." Like, you'll just, I was told him at the time I was doing extract kits, and he said, "Just buy kit after kit after kit and just try different styles and whatever. You're not going to get any of them right, but as the more that you do it, the more recipes that you get under your belt, the more you're going to enjoy doing it." And he was 100% right. I mean, I don't think that, while now, we've gotten a little bit older, I do at least have, I wouldn't necessarily say a style that I like, but I do know, and for better or worse, what I enjoy in terms of what I want out of a beer. But I'll still try anything. I'll try a sour, a stout, a porter. While those wouldn't be my go-tos if I had to, get something on tap or buy something from Kroger's, I would still like to at least try and brew it. And I think that's what's kept me going, is that I would continue to try new things. I would continue to try, different things, as I'm brewing, or, trying to change even just the slightest things so that I can understand, how altering the process changes things. Why add a hop at 60 minutes versus 30 minutes? What happens if you change up, having 10 pounds of two-row versus 12 pounds of two-row? What does that do for you? If you change your mash temperature, what does that do for you? Just little things, so that you start getting into the science of it and start really understanding like how the science changes, or the chemistry changes what you get, like once you go to pull from that tap. And I think that's really what's kept me going, because it's interesting. It changes. There's not, unless you have let's say a grain father or something, or you've done this in the same batch over and over again, so you know exactly what's going to come out. It's very hard to guarantee that if you were to use the same recipe, you're going to get the same results. And that's interesting to me, and that's why I think that's one of the biggest things that's kept me going. Well, what about you? You're muted.
We do have a lot of engineer type personalities that come into the store, and there needs to be an exact answer, and that's why I always tell people beer making is like cooking. There's art to it, and how do you define art or fashion? It's always changing. As soon as you catch up to the curve has changed. So there's no. A lot of people want a black or white. What's the answer? And I always tell people, I can give you my answer. I can tell you what the books tell you, but at the end of the day, it's pretty hard to screw it up. With that being said, what kept me brewing, the first thing was kegging. I got into kegging pretty quickly, and not bottling and messing with all that kept me brewing. I did go periods of time where I didn't brew a whole lot. I would, give it a break. Kids and life is basically the reason for that, but I just kept brewing. And honestly, I got brewing, and next thing you know, I gotta make a stout. I gotta make a porter. I gotta make all these beer styles that I didn't like. So to answer your question, kegging, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, staying in my lane. I know I like pale ales, IPAs. I even like some lagers. Just knowing what beers that you like to drink and brewing those. Because nothing slows your brewing career down more than making a stout, because you got to put a stout on tap. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you got to do. It's seasonal. You got to do it. And quite honestly, you don't like stouts. Doesn't mean you don't appreciate one. You wouldn't go to a brew pub and enjoy a flight that has a stout on it, but to have 5 gallons of it, no, thank you. So I just learned to stay in my lane and brew the beers I enjoy to drink day in and day out. The beers I don't like to brew a day in, day out, I bottle. That's why I brought the cider. I'm not a cider drinker. So,
Right.
You know what? I bottled it because I knew if I put it on tap, it would stay in that keg way too long. So that's what kept me brewing, is just brewing beer styles I knew I liked to drink.
Yeah, and I think that totally makes sense, because I think if I were to continue, sure, there are some that, I mean, honestly, I don't think that I've ever done, let's see, I don't think I've ever done a like a red. I haven't done one of those. Oh, that looks beautiful.
Yeah.
I
mean, that's,
I
don't know if the camera can yeah.
That's clear, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I've done a. I don't think I've done a red. I'm trying to think, like Kolsch. I don't think I've ever done one of those. I mean, this year was the first time I've ever done a Hefeweizen. I mean, I know there are other, and I don't have the equipment to go through and do like a true lager. So I mean, I would have to like upgrade on the equipment to do that. But I know there are other styles that I'd like to get to. But like you just said, I mean, if it's not something that you're truly into, I mean, why do it? I mean, if you know what you enjoy, and you understand the process, or or if you're even interested in learning the process to brewing it, stick with that. Stay in your lane. I mean, you can make it. It's a hobby, right? So you can make it as fun as you want it to be. And I think that's a huge point. I mean, to understand, or better understand, like, why folks do it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. What makes it fun? What keeps it fun? What, Charlie Papazian, who I read his book books before, it's relax, don't worry, have a homebrew. This is a hobby. And what I'm going to say what he means by that is, it's a hobby. It's fun. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be, competition ready, but we're experimenting. That is gratifying as a home brewer, to say we are setting the trends. We're not following trends, we're setting trends. I believe homebrewers do that. All the beer styles that become popular, homebrewers made them popular. Right. Not Sierra Nevada or Budweiser or any of those people. Even the craft beer level, it was homebrewers who said, why not? Let's see what happens. Right. And that, to me, is where it becomes art, and where it becomes innovative and exciting, and where my brewing kind of has, in the middle of doing all those things, is, why do we do a 60-minute mash? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? Because I'm kind of an instigator by nature. Why do we do these principles? Why is this, the Bible of how we do it? And quite honestly, the brewlosopher and customers that come in there, if you put 2 beverages side by side, there's a lot of things that imply it really doesn't matter. A lot of the things that we said we have to do aren't true. They're not factual. And so, to me, to push that envelope is exciting.
Yeah, and I think that, especially now with with some of the equipment that I know that you can purchase at the store, like the Grainfather, the Mash and Boil, some of those automated systems where it takes some of the risk out of the equation when it comes to brewing. You can be a little bit riskier, or you can make, I would say, significant changes in your everyday recipe or your go-to recipe, and try and quantify, or qualify, whether it be through taste, flavor, aroma, whatever the case may be, on that by using some of those systems. And I do think that's something that a lot of folks, that if they do have that, not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like a technical mindset or an engineering mindset, just if you're curious, You know, I mean, if you just have that curious mindset to, you know, if you were to take a, you know, a kit home with you and you read through the directions and it says, you know, on, you know, it's brew day and you're supposed to, you know, you know, take it and mash at, you know, 154 degrees. Well, why? Do you have to? Like, if it's at 156, are you completely hosed? If it's at 152, are you completely hosed? No.
And heaven forbid you use more than one thermometer.
Exactly. I mean, you know, because how often is that actually going to work out where two thermometers read the same? So what, you know, what are you going to do if you're, you know, you know, are you going to sit there and wait all day until it says exactly 154? Like, no. You know, it's going to change it a little bit, but how, you know, how much is it going to change? I mean, that's where you start to get curious and you start to get the, you know, start to question things. And I was asking those same questions like when I first got started, like, you know, well, it says 154 and it's currently at 156 and I'm ready to go. So we're just going to do it. And, you know, we'll figure it out from there.
It's even like the saying I've always heard, the rule of thumb came from beer making. They would stick their thumb in the beer, and that's how they knew the beer was ready to have the yeast pitch into it. So their thumb was their thermometer. You know, the variance that's in your thumb has got to be, you know, 20 degrees. And so that's why I tell people, a lot of people that get started, I say, add your yeast, if you can, somewhere between 60 and 80 degrees. You're going to make beer. It's going to be perfectly fine to drink. And they go, well, the recipe says, you know, 67 degrees, 63, you know, whatever. I'm like, that's cool. That's great. But if you're getting started, I'm just telling you, back to what Charlie Papazian said, don't worry, drink a homebrew. And what he means by that is 60 to 80 degrees works. I say it all the time. You know, at below 60, I say you're starting to run the risk of your yeast going dormant. Above 80 is when you start getting, you know, appley, you know, off flavors, or you might just kill your yeast altogether if you get going too high. But 60 to 80 degrees, don't worry about it. Just let it do its thing, especially if it's your first batch. You know, you're going to make perfectly fine beer. You know, that's the thing for me as I kept brewing. It was, you know, why are we taking these principles? Why do I care about 156 or 152? You know, and I really got to lean back and start to really enjoy the hobby. The brew systems like Grainfather and all, they're great. They're accurate. I had a decent system that had pumps and the whole gamut. And I learned in the middle of my brewing career, if you want to call it that, it got to be a lot of work. It started losing its fun because I felt like I was cleaning shit all the time. And I did not get to enjoy brewing because I was cleaning and I was stressing and I was worried about hitting numbers exactly. And quite honestly, that's when I started to phase out of brewing a little bit. You know, it got too serious for me because it's like, why am I stressing about all these principles that I've been told and I've never even pushed the envelope of seeing if they're correct or not? You know, and I'm not that I question people who know more than me. It's just one of those like, why do we do this? And I started brewing beers, and as I got, I'm gonna use the term lazy with my brewing, I found out that my beers weren't really suffering too much, if at all, and in ways they were better. It's like the New England IPA. You told someone you would never, you know, there's no 60-minute edition. What? There's no 50-minute edition? Nope. Yeah. There's no, you have 30-minute edition? Nope. Oh, you're going to make shit beer. And we got scared straight into that for so many years that it took home brewers that just really pushed the envelope. Oh, if you don't boil it for 60 minutes, you're going to have DMS. If you don't do this, you're going to have, if you don't make a starter, if you don't do this, you know, it was always those scare tactics. You're going to make shit beer if you don't do it. You're just a shitty home brewer if you don't make rehydrate your yeast. I can honestly say I've rehydrated my yeast one time. Ever.
Twice.
You know what? I made perfectly fine beer. And it wasn't like I was trying to throw a middle finger up to the home brewing or beer making in general. To me, it was just one of those, why am I going to take unnecessary steps when I made perfectly fine beer, not doing that altogether? And it becomes difficult as an owner because it's, should I rehydrate my yeast? And I kind of say, I don't know. What's right ultimately is what's right for you. If you feel you need to rehydrate your yeast and it makes you feel better, then by all means do it. Because if it's going to leave question in your mind of, did my beer turn out crappy because I didn't rehydrate my yeast? Well, then just go ahead and do it if you're willing to put the effort for it. But personally, I just sprinkle it on the top, put the lid on, and the chips fall where they may. And I would say that's honestly, you know, in the middle of me brewing, that was me learning lazy isn't even the right factor, but just keeping the work out of it is what kept me brewing.
And I think as you start to get into it more, and this is for like the folks watching that are new to brewing or, you know, want to get into it. I think the more batches that you do and the more folks that you start to talk to, you will start to understand that, you know, there is some, let's say, leeway when it comes to brewing. You know, while there are some hard targets that you might want to hit, there's some wiggle room. And even if you don't hit those targets dead on, I mean, there's either ways that you can recover, or, I mean, again, as you said earlier, Joey, I mean, you're not going to make terrible beer in the process. You're going to make something that you like. You're going to make something that, you know, it's not going to be award winning, but that's not what you're shooting for. You're shooting for something that you want to drink. So I think that, you know, I think it's well said that, you know, folks tend to forget that, yeah, I mean, you know, they give you the directions in those kits or going through the recipes or whatever for a reason to kind of put you on that path. But, you know, the path is pretty wide, and, you know, there's a number of ways that you can kind of stray, you know, in either direction and still come up with something that you'll enjoy drinking for however long, you know, depending on your batch size.
You know, that's the thing. And I very much relate brewing with art or fashion. I think I said it earlier in the cast. And what I mean by that is you can look at fashion and you can look at whatever. You know, we don't wear bell-bottom jeans anymore.
Right.
Well, I have no sense of fashion, so maybe we do. I don't know. But what I mean by that is that didn't mean that at the end of the day, we have to be clothed. And we made beer very primitively. You know, to make beer, we didn't have star sand. We didn't have this. We didn't have that. And so people read these directions and go, I have to do this step, this step, this step. That kind of like, I don't want to say engineer mindset, but just that, you know, following direction mindset. And I'm one of those where I'm not saying if you're new to homebrewing, you need to go completely rogue and just, you know, screw all the advice. I'm just going to freestyle. You need to have a guideline. It's very tough to put in the middle of, there's a guideline. Don't get me wrong. There's these directions, but don't read them word for word. And I always tell people, I can give you like a couple simple pointers. The first thing is, don't bring your specialty grains to a boil.
Yep.
The second advice is, when you add your malts, turn your burner off and take your pot off the burner. That's my second step advice. The third advice is, when you cool your beer down, add it to your fermenter. If it's not between the 60 and 80 degree marker, to put the lid on it and wait till tomorrow. Wait till it's the right temperature. Don't worry about it. Just let it go. And the last step is, if you start worrying or panicking about your beer, panicking only makes things worse. Wait till the next day. Call me. Get on the internet. Don't just start reacting because you think something's not going right. That's it. I mean, those 4 simple steps, I promise you will make beer, and it will be good, and you will do well. But when you come to me and say, but the directions say, I got to keep my specialty grains between 155 and 170, or, you know, whatever they say. Okay, that's great. But it's not that big of a deal, you know. And when you follow those 4 steps, you will make good beer. And yes, are you, like you said, Chris, are you going to make award-winning beer? Probably not. Or maybe. Who knows? I mean, the best.
You at least get over a 20 at a homebrewing competition.
If you enter in the right style.
Yeah. If you enter in the right style. Yeah.
But you know, the best inventions ever came from people who made mistakes. So don't stress about it. Keep it fun. Keep it, like I said, just stay in your lane. The reason why you did it initially was because it was going to be fun. It sounded like something fun to do, or, you know, you had aspirations of open your own brewery. Just keep it fun, because just don't take it too seriously, and you'll love it.
So then, like, so building off of that side question, what was your favorite or most fun beer that you've brewed so far?
Ever? Or what
Yeah.
kept me in homebrewing?
Yeah, what I mean, just the single, I mean, just single recipe that you've done. I mean, what was the most fun that you had brewing in it, like in a single brewing session?
I would say most recently it was that New England IPA that I brewed. Only because it was me admitting I hypocrite isn't even the right word, saying I didn't get that style. I didn't want any part of it. And because I stayed open-minded enough to give it a try, next thing you know, I'm brewing one. Because when I first started
beer that you used animal crackers in,
that beer was stretching. It wasn't animal crackers; it was graham crackers.
That's right, yeah.
But you know that New England IPA that I made when I first opened the store and people were ranting and raving about it. That's why they got into homebrewing. I just rolled my eyes and said, you know what? We chased clear beer for so long. Why do you want to keep it so damn hazy? I can't understand this. And to me, it was just that kind of like, when you talk Apple products, you talk like fanboy, just like, you don't know why you want to do it. You just want to do it. You don't know nothing. Sorry, Chris, I'm throwing you under the bus. Can art, just because the damn can art looks fancy.
Sign me up.
Doesn't mean the beer tastes great. So the fact that, for me, I would say the most exciting for me is to brew a style of beer and keep my eyes open to beer is what I have most recently been the most proud about. Is I don't get it. That doesn't mean I don't want to try it. And even though my mind says you don't want to like this, you don't want to like this, and then you try it and you go, you know what? I'm on the bandwagon.
Yep,
I'm on the bandwagon, and I like it. And admitting you're wrong for have an opinion before you've tried it makes me feel good as a home brewer, to be able to even admit that. And I would say probably 6, 5, somewhere around there years ago, I brewed a recipe, back to staying in your lane, where it was just like, this is it. I'm a home brewer and I'm always going to home brew. This beer I can't get on the shelf. This is my recipe. I took pride in it. I'm a home brewer and I'm always going to do it just because this turned out fantastic. And to me, and I realized I'm not pleasing anyone but me. If you didn't like it, if any of my friends didn't like it, if it got a 8 in a homebrew competition, it doesn't matter. I brewed a beer that I would drink day in and day out. And that's when I got hooked and stayed hooked on homebrewing. At first, I just chased the idea of brewing a world-class beer, and to actually finally brew a world-class beer to you, or to me at the time, that's where I was hook, line, sinker, a homebrewer for life.
Right. Yeah.
And to this day, I bet you if I brewed that recipe now, I'd hate it. I probably wouldn't be able to hate it. Because that's the thing. As you drink beer, and if you're into craft beer, you're into home brewing, your taste buds are constantly evolving.
Oh, yes.
You know?
I mean, we had that conversation over Sierra Nevada. What was it, like a month ago?
Yeah.
Where it's just, I don't think that I would really go out and, grab one of their pale ales, or at least that wouldn't be like my go-to. Not nowadays. But if you threw one of those in front of me about, 5, 6 years ago, I'd drink a 6-pack in a night if I could.
Yeah.
It just, it changes, man. It really does.
That was a thing that when I first started home brewing, like I said, I was a Coors drinker. That was pretty much at Keystone because I was cheap at the time. And when someone we knew who was into craft beer gave me my first Sierra Nevada, and I thought it was the nastiest beer in the world. I thought only hipsters drank that shit. I just didn't get it. I just did not get it. And now, and then back to in the middle where you're talking about, I thought that was like, to me, one of the best beers ever. Like, this beer is fantastic. It's well crafted. It's like admitting it's not even admitting you're wrong, but just keeping an open mind is the biggest thing. And I guess it goes back to the first point we talked about, was I got into home brewing because the big BMC told us light fizzy beer is what we drink. What we drink. And we watched the commercials as kids. We watched our parents drink it. We watched everyone we knew drink it. So as we turned 21, that's just what we drank, because that's what we were bred into. So to have homebrewing enter my life and just realize like, no, like advertising is why we buy this stuff.
Yes.
It's not because it necessarily tastes good. And then you brew beers, it tastes like crap. But then you start brewing, some recipes, and to this day, I'm not joking. I would take back to advertising. I'd take you said Colt 45. I'd take a Old English 800. Is it? That's my go-to cheap beer. OE, 99 cents for a 24-ounce can. I would take that over a Bud Light any day of the week.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean it's better beer. I'm just saying
for value
and for whatever, we're bred to like a certain beer that, quite honestly, I'm not sure we ever really liked. We did it with, we grew up from the fast food industry. And so to really just kind of say time out, this isn't the only option out there. I think homebrewing for that.
Exactly. Yeah. Wholeheartedly agree with you. At least for me, I would say that the most fun brewing that I've ever had is you remember that the very first pumpkin brew that I did at your old house, where like cut up pumpkin meat,
baked in the oven,
baked in the oven, put it in the boil. I think that was the one that really sold me, because I was like, dude, this is fucking awesome. Like putting all this stuff in there, adding the spices, infusing the beer like with that flavor. I was like, dude, like, okay, well, what else can I put in here now? Okay. And, hence to, fast forward to today where I'm throwing mangoes and apples and strawberries into a beer that's sitting right behind me. I mean, but it really was like, okay, so if I can do this, I mean, what else can I do? Like, what else can you add? What else can you change to, to a brew or a recipe profile in order to, mimic that specific taste? That's where it really kind of sold me. And I would say the most proud was the one that we did for that brewing competition, because it was the first time where, at least for me, taking something down and having it judged by some folks that, I would say for the most part knew way more about brewing than I did, and still do. But in having them give me an honest feedback on my beer, and that gets us into our next topic about why we still brew is, at least for me, it's I like to get that feedback. It's about when we talked about likening craft brew or home brewing in and of itself to to art, to fashion, to cooking. Well, all those things are things that you share with other people. And while most folks, they do like that, constructive criticism back, I'm very much in that same boat. I like to share, what I make with other people. If I could, brew 5 gallons and then just, give 1 gallon to everybody else and save the rest for me, that's fine. But at the very least, I do like to get that feedback from folks to say like, hey, do you like this? What do you think about, what do you think of this, this IPA that I brewed? What do you think about this Hefeweizen that I brewed? Too sweet, too much hops, too malty, whatever. And I think that, that porter that we did, even though we went completely off the rails, like with the recipe for it, it was interesting to go down and, one, get the feedback from the judges, 2, have the other folks that were there, sample it and talk with them and see what they thought about it. But I mean, it was, talking with other folks that are also interested in homebrewing and getting that feedback to say, like, maybe you shouldn't added so many jalapenos. Okay, well, fine. Maybe I should. But I mean, that's kind of what's kept me going in it. And I think that's kind of why I still like, why I still, homebrew, for the most part.
I would say, honestly, what kept me homebrewing is not owning a store. It's not any other reason than I went through the beginning, the middle, and for me now, it's almost therapeutic. It's relaxing. When times are tough, it gives me something to just occupy my mind. It gives me something to do. It gives me something to look forward to sample. Because when you homebrew a beer, you don't get to try that beer the same day. You got to wait for that shit. And so for me now, it's truly, that's why I relate it to art and fashion. Art and fashion's never completed. And people who are just in it for the dollar or to be trendy, or they'll be the next fidget spinner, silly bands, the pogs when we were kids, pogs.
No, I love those.
The list goes on and on and on. However, for me, homebrewing is one of those, I do it for no other reason. It just fulfills me. It makes me relaxed. I feel at ease. I don't do it for anyone but me. I don't care if I win a trophy, a medal. I'm okay with sending it to a homebrew competition. And you know what? If they say it's terrible, kind of goes back to that recipe I told you, it got me hooked. I do it because it makes me happy. It makes me feel good. And I'm creating art and fashion. And sometimes the people who are the most innovative are the ones that are just kind of, they don't share it with the public, because once it becomes the new trendy thing, like a black IPA or what we talked about, like I brewed any IPA, that's when it stops being cool, or, you're a sellout or you're whatever. And for me, I don't brew for any of those reasons other than it just calms me. It makes me happy. It gives me something to look forward to. And I know it's not going to happen with a click of a finger. And I think that's the best thing home brewing's done for me is you don't get instant gratification with home brewing. It takes some, you gotta let it ferment. You gotta let it condition. Yeah. You have to be patient, and it makes you look forward to the future. And quite honestly, that's why I homebrew today. It just makes me look forward to the future, makes me excited about new things, and I feel like I'm being innovative.
It's challenging.
Yeah,
I would say that it's 100% challenging, and I would say that even if you have a recipe in front of you that you've brewed, I don't know how many times. There's always that chance that you can make a slight alteration, or you can do something slightly different, and it's almost like a completely new experience. Almost every time that you brew. I don't think, for as long as we've both been doing it, I don't think I've ever walked out either into my garage or to wherever I've been brewing at and just kind of gone through the motions, right? Mm-hmm. It's not like, I'm gonna, put this pot over here and I'm gonna get this water up here and I'm gonna do that. No, it's fun.
You find inspiration to every batch.
The second you get that, the second you get the water going and you start looking at the recipes, and this is me, and this is just me. I look at my recipe and I don't know, and it doesn't matter how much time I spent into the recipe, putting together the recipe itself, and I can already have all my grains and hops in front of me. I'm already looking for a way to change it. It's the same thing that I do when I cook. I can have a recipe in front of me, and then I'll just start looking for ways to change it. I'll be like, okay, so I'm gonna make some pancakes today. All right. Well, do we have any cinnamon or something like that I can use to throw in here, to throw into the batter? And that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it innovative. That's what makes it creative.
It goes that you're your own artist. You paint your own picture with beer. You get to do, if you want to put cinnamon in it, you get to push the boundaries. It's your own palette. You get to do whatever you want with it, and you're doing it for you. You don't have to worry about production or scale or advertising or any of these things these breweries have to do. You're doing it for one sole purpose. You.
Yeah.
You. And some people, don't get me wrong, get started because they want to enter in competitions. They want to win trophies and medals and everything. And that's fine. To me, it's just, you get to sit back, relax, have a homebrew. I think man, he did. Yeah. He really wrapped it up. And it took me almost 10 years now to really, be that way and keep my eyes open and realize, what? I do not know everything about homebrewing, and I never will. And because I recognize that, I feel good as a store owner, knowing I will never know everything. The day I know everything is the day I stop learning anything. And so, all these principles that the Brewlosopher does and whatever. I love pushing those boundaries and finding out new exciting ways to brew, because we've been brewing for longer than any of us have ever been alive, and we still haven't perfected it. It's not an exact science. That's why it's art. There's not an exact science to it. You can't break it down and be GTO with it. You have to, experiment, because there's no exact right and wrong. There are lots of shades of gray.
We've had this conversation before. Look at the different, the hops varieties that are available now that have changed since when we first started brewing. And most of them are, descendants of each other that have similar characteristics, but folks have changed it over time. Same with the yeast strains that have come out. There's new things happening in this industry almost seemingly like every 6 to 9 months, somewhere in there, that there's something new that's changing. There's new process, there's a new hop variety, yeast strain, something can be done differently in order to change the way that we look at this hobby. And so for me, that almost pushes me to say that, okay, well, if they're doing all this to remain innovative, I should do the same. I might have some things that I like, but with all these new things coming out, it just continues to keep me interested in what's coming out. And I think that the more folks the more folks that come to HBYOB, that's the same thing that I'll be telling them. And anybody else that I talk to that's interested in it. It's it might sound like a simple process, or I would say not a simple process, but a constant process. But it's something that's changing. There's a ton of nuance to it that once you get into it, you'll pick it up pretty quickly.
I tell people all the time, it's like tattoos. You either get one and you're done, and check it off your bucket list, or I just took my my daughter not too long ago, my oldest, and we went and got her tattoo. She turned 18, and she's thinking about the next one while she's getting her first one. And I think homebrewing's the same way. You either go, oh, I've brewed a batch of beers, a lot of work, and I had to clean a lot of bottles and fill a lot of bottles, or you go, this is awesome. And it's so funny because you really see one or the other with it. It's truly, you're either in hook, line, and sinker, or you're like, I did it, check mark, I'm done, and I don't need to do it no more. It's just an amazing hobby, and every day I wake up, I'm glad I get to be part of it. I never would have dreamed to have that opportunity to do it, and I'm doing it now. It's amazing, how I have evolved from 8 years, 10 years, somewhere in between there, to be in this position. Because if it weren't for homebrewing, I'd still just be drinking crappy beer because BMC told me to. And then the fact I question it, and I still question it, and I realize I'm never right. I feel I get to have the opportunity to admit that and know we will never perfect this hobby. So, hats off to the NEIPAs, because I swore I wouldn't like you, and what? I'm now on the bandwagon. So
exactly.
That's I guess to wrap things up. That's the greatest thing about this hobby, is just being able to stay open-minded. Stay open-minded, because you know what? And I use the term staying in your lane. I do stay in my lane. I know what I like and I know what I don't like. However, by staying in my lane, I'm also admitting I know I'm not 100% right in this hobby. And I'm always want to try new, innovative things. And when people come to me and say, you got to tell me what's right, what's wrong, I always admit there isn't an exact answer. I can tell you many scenarios, and I can tell you what I've experienced, so forth and so on. But ultimately, what's best for you is the best thing to do. If it makes you feel better, if it makes you happy, if it will put your mind at ease, do what's right for you. Relax, drink a homebrew.
Exactly. Yeah, could not agree more. So we're wrapping up tonight. Thanks again, everybody, for coming out. Hope you enjoyed the show. And Joey, can you tell us, we got any events coming up soon, or what we've got going on for the folks over the next couple months or so? We're getting into summertime, so I know there's going to be some folks brewing.
So we're getting into summertime. All Grains alive and well. I have a couple 5K events I will be working off a couple calories from all the homebrew I drink. So I hope you guys attend those. And if you want to email me personally, you can reach me at joey@hbyob.com.
Awesome, man. And yeah, definitely looking forward to that. You'll probably catch me out there sweating my butt off running at a couple of those 5K events as well. Also, on May 19th, if I'm not mistaken, you can find me down at Rheingeist Brewery. I'll be down there for the homebrew competition, repping HBYOB for for the morning. So definitely looking forward to that, and seeing what the other homebrewers in the area have to offer. So that should be a fun event. So again, thanks again, guys, for coming out tonight. We definitely appreciate you giving us a listen. Come down to the store, check us out, HBYOB, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Have a good one.